Hello, welcome. I'm Ben Thompson. This is BBC News Now. The Ukrainian military says Kyiv has come under missile attack as a delegation of African leaders visits the country to discuss ways to end the war with Russia. The Air Force says it shot down a dozen rockets, including hypersonic missiles, during the attack. At least 2 explosions were heard in the capital. Ukraine's foreign minister said the message to Africa was clear. Russia wants more war, not peace. Well, the African delegation is making its way to the capital. It said it would press on with plans to meet President Zelensky before visiting Vladimir Putin on Saturday. Let's take you live now to our correspondent, Yalda Hakim, who is in the village on the outskirts of Kyiv. It's a village that was hit by those airstrikes. Yalda, this all becoming horribly familiar. Just tell us what you saw and what you heard.
Yeah, Ben, day and night, people across this country are dealing with air raid sirens and then the reality that it is a Russian missile or drone that's targeting an area. A little earlier this morning, we were forced under a underground bunker because, of course, there were those air raid sirens that went off, and then we saw, actually, those air defense systems and the plumes of smoke from the air defense systems. And then we heard what had happened in other parts of the capital and here on the outskirts. Now I can just show you a house just behind me. The smoke you can still see in the distance where that house has been completely destroyed. I'm told a woman around 80 years old lived there, and as you can see, I mean, her home is completely destroyed. We got a little bit more information to say that it is debris as a result of the air defense systems really working away, and the house that I'm just going to show you now, we're going to pan over to, is where a 12-year-old boy lived as well, and he was injured. His foot was injured. A little while ago I spoke to him, and he told me what that experience was like. He said that they have been living in these circumstances for the entire year, but he's never been so scared as he was earlier this morning when he heard the air raid sirens and then he realized it was a missile strike. Just have a listen.
Та поліз в укриття. Потім я зрозумів, що щось сталося погане.
So I understood that it's the missile because I heard the sound, like, you know, when a jet is flying, like in an aircraft, when it's flee, you can, the specific sound, I recognize it. And I understood I need to hide somewhere. So I went to the shelter. And after that, yeah, that was it basically.
And what were you thinking when you realized there was an attack?
Зрозумів, що може мене не бути, і що все, що в мене тут є, його не буде, і все.
Well, I understood that I can die, and that what we all have here will be gone, will be destroyed. That's what I understood.
Is this something you've been feeling for the past year?
Так страшно, як сьогодні, не було. Відчуття, звісно, було страху, але не таке, як сьогодні. Сьогодні просто я нічого не зрозумів.
I never felt so scary as today. I mean, it was for some time already, but today it was something exceptional. And honestly speaking, I didn't understand what happened.
And when did you phone your mum? How did you get in touch with your mum?
Потім написав їй смс, воно дійшло, зняв відео і так ми з нею зв'язалися.
So I called my mom when I went out of the bunker because there is no connection in there, and I called my mom, but she also had no connection. So then I wrote her a message, and I also sent her a video, and that's how she understood what happened and came here.
You must have been petrified.
Так. Мене в цей час не було вдома, і зазвичай ми не ховаємося в укриття. В нас є одна кімната, де спрацьовує правило 2 стін, тому навіть коли ракети ми
I was extremely scared because I was not at home with him. He was home alone. And you know what is funny? That we quite often we hear missiles, we have drones flying above our village. And normally, because it's happening for such a long time, normally recently we started go to the cellar that we use as a shelter. And we have like a deep room in the house that has this 2-wall rule. So we follow the 2-wall rules. And I'm so grateful to my son because even though he's 12 years old, he managed to make a decision. And if I would be home, we would probably stay in the house. But he made a decision and he went to the cellar for cover.
Well, you just heard there from a mother and son living in this community. Virtually every house in this street has been impacted in some way, either completely destroyed or damaged. Already the community here is trying to clean up the rubble. The police have arrived, the emergency workers arrived a little early, and as you can see, the police have cordoned off the area. They've asked us not to go in. You can probably see also the plumes of smoke in that house that I was showing you a little earlier. It's really sort of gathering pace, the smoke, and I can see from here actually probably a little bit of a fire as well. So I'll just ask our cameraman to move because the police are just trying to get through. But I'm also told that you know, we are in northern parts of the outskirts of Kyiv, and the Russians are launching their rockets from further out that way. So you know, this is feeling very real for the people here who, since early last year, very much felt like, okay, the Russian column of tanks that they had seen on the outskirts of the capital had disappeared, even though every now and then the air defense systems are hard at work trying to deal with those missile strikes, trying to deal with the drones that get sent to the capital. And again, as you say, the African delegation is here as well, and the Ukrainian foreign minister has said, well, you know, they bring a message of peace, but is this the kind of peace that Vladimir Putin is talking about? So this is just the reality that this particular community is experiencing, and they feel quite lucky. There are no fatalities here, although we know that 6 people have been left injured, including the 12-year-old boy that you saw in the clip a little earlier, and of course the elderly woman. Some press, Ukrainian press, have gathered here. The local community are trying to put out the smoke now. The police are still here and they're trying to keep people safe, so they've asked them to stay away from the actual site of where the action basically took place. But we're going to spend the rest of our day here reporting from this scene, speaking to the local community to get a sense of how they're feeling in the midst of all of this.
Yolda, thank you. It's good to get that sense of geography of what really is happening on the ground there where you are. We'll be back with you throughout the day, as you said, as you can bring us more details about what's happened in that latest missile attack. Yolda Hakim, thank you. So as Yolda was telling us, this all happening, of course, as an African peace delegation is making its way to the Ukrainian capital to try and broker some sort of peace deal. That delegation includes leaders from South Africa, from Zambia and from Egypt. Now, countries across Africa are under pressure from soaring food prices, made worse, of course, by that war in Ukraine. Pierre-Antoine Denis looks now at what's at stake for those countries and why they believe they may find a breakthrough.
There are a few reasons why these 6 men believe they may have a path to peace between Russia and Ukraine. But let's start with their joker card, the non-alignment policy. Since the beginning of the war, Africa as a continent tried to remain as far away from the war as possible. In fact, 4 of the 6 leaders that are heading to the 2 countries have officially abstained from condemning the war at the UN. But aren't they drawn in already? Because if we look at this man, Cyril Ramaphosa, the South African president and leader of this delegation, well, he is in a bit of a strange position because despite claiming his neutrality over the war, his country has done military exercises with Russia and China back in February, and South Africa is planning a law change over a potential Vladimir Putin ICC arrest warrant should the Russian president come to the country at the end of the summer for a summit. So that is really angering Washington, that is threatening to pull its funding from the country, but this view is really popular at home in South Africa, and Cyril Ramaphosa really need a win as well as all these leaders, because economically Africa is already a collateral victim of the war. These are the words of the African Union last year. Indeed, the record is striking because in 2022, as a result of the war, there has been a 14.5% average inflation all across the continent. Many reasons for that, of course. We have seen an oil shortage and queues at petrol stations, but more importantly, the prices of key commodities like wheat and cooking oil have been drastically affected because of the continent's dependence on Ukrainian wheat export. So no matter who they root for, these 6 men have a lot to play for during this trip to the 2 countries, and this is not a simple diplomatic parade.
So Pierre-Antoine Denis there, looking at why that African delegation thinks it may be able to achieve a peace deal. Let's show you what's happening right now in St. Petersburg. This is where President Putin is speaking. He's been on his feet now for about an hour and a half, addressing leaders there. So they are business leaders. It's an economic summit. It's a regular feature of his diary, but we know it's important as well for him to keep the business community on side. He's been talking about all sorts of things, most notably, though, not the war in Ukraine. He's addressed economic growth. He says the Russian economy on track to grow by 2% this year. He's talked about how Russia is meeting its climate targets. He's talked about international diplomacy. We know, for example, this morning meeting the ruler of the United Arab Emirates. And he's also been talking about international relations and what is at stake as Russia tries to project a more sovereign, more independent role right around the world. But at the same time in Brussels, the head of NATO, the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, has been speaking, also touching on events in Ukraine. He's talked there about the importance of Ukraine growing closer to NATO. There's been a lot of discussion about whether Ukraine will be permitted membership to NATO. But just a line related to what Jens Stoltenberg was calling for establishing a maritime centre for what they call the protection of undersea infrastructure. Now, we take that to mean some of the important telecommunications connections that lie at the bottom of the sea. They are particularly vulnerable to attack, sabotage, interference, and notably that is a claim that has been levelled at Russia on a number of occasions. So Jens Stoltenberg there saying that NATO has agreed to establish a centre that will protect undersea infrastructure. He's also talked about the need for an increase in defence spending of NATO members, one would assume largely to support events in Ukraine. We know many members providing training and military equipment and hardware for the war in Ukraine. So that is St. Petersburg. President Putin. Let's take you to Brussels, though, and we can hear from the US Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin. He will also be addressing that war in Ukraine. Let's listen in.
Also continuing to move forward to adapt NATO nuclear deterrence to our shifting threat environment. NATO is also deepening its cooperation with partners in the Indo-Pacific, especially on protecting critical infrastructure and cyberspace. And our work together with Indo-Pacific partners is vital for protecting the rules, rights, and norms that make us all safer. So I'm enormously proud of all the progress that NATO has made since we last came together. The alliance faces historic challenges, but we're meeting those challenges with confidence and, above all, with unity. Make no mistake, we will not be drawn into Putin's war of choice, but we will strengthen NATO's defense and deterrence. And we will defend every inch of NATO territory, and we will continue to defend the open world of rules and rights that NATO has so proudly supported for nearly 75 years. So thank you very much, and I'll be glad to take a couple of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. First question will go to Christopher Gordon, Air and Space Forces Magazine.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, in what ways would NATO's security be strengthened if Sweden were to become a member of the alliance in the upcoming months? How specifically would such a development enhance the alliance's military and deterrence capabilities in the Nordic region and generally? Why is it important? And if Sweden is not admitted into the alliance soon, what specific steps will the U.S. take to safeguard Sweden's security in the meantime? Would there be more military deployments, exercises, training, planning? What will the U.S. do to prepare the way for Sweden's eventual integration into NATO and protect in the meantime? And if I may ask a related question, sir, did you make any headway in your meeting with Turkey today on winning support for Sweden's accession into NATO? And can the provision of F-16s to Turkey go ahead if Turkey does not agree to Sweden's accession into NATO?
Hey, Chris, I lost you on about the 10th question there, but but we'll try to catch up here. First of all, in terms of the value that Sweden brings to NATO, as you know, Chris, Sweden is a strong democracy, and it's a country with a substantial military capability. They've invested over the years in modernization. We have trained with them in a number of cases, and so being interoperable in a very short period of time would be no challenge with Sweden. And I was just in Sweden a couple of weeks ago, as you may know, and I had the opportunity to spend some time with the Minister of Defense, and also got a chance to look at some of their capabilities. Very impressed with the leadership in their military and the enthusiasm and commitment of their troops. So what they bring is, again, substantial military capability, a modern force, and they've invested a lot in their force. I was also impressed by their domain awareness, maritime domain awareness, and the awareness of what's going on in the skies around them as well, and in the region. So they bring that with to NATO as well. It will enhance our ability to be aware of what's going on in the maritime and the aerial domains. You ask about increasing activity with Sweden. We've done that already. We've increased the number of exercises and ship visits and a number of other things with Sweden. And so, you know, I think we've continued to make progress and increased our opportunities to work towards greater interoperability. So, I think very encouraging. Now, you mentioned my interaction with my Turkish colleague. You know, he's a brand new minister, recently installed. So my purpose in meeting him today was to just, you know, an introductory meeting, just to congratulate him on being installed as Minister of Defense. And of course, you know, sees every opportunity to encourage him to move forward and approve the accession of Sweden. So, but it's a very short meeting, and I don't have anything to report out from that encounter. So.
Thank you, sir. Next question go to Politico EU. Lily.
So there we will leave Brussels and the US Defence Secretary that's talking about that ongoing war in Ukraine. One of his key lines there, we must be patient, he said, as Ukraine wages its military campaign, referring, of course, to that counter-offensive that has now begun as Ukrainian forces try to win back ground that has been seized by Russia. The other image you were looking at was President Putin. He's speaking to an economic conference in St. Petersburg. We're going to follow both of those events and bring you any further developments as we get them.